If you're a Marvel fan, then you know exactly what I'm talking about, but for those who don't, I'll give a quick explanation. Warning, contains movie spoilers. Click off this video right now if you haven't seen any Avengers film. In Marvel's Avengers Infinity War, the main antagonist, known as Thanos, used the 6 Infinity Stones to wipe out half of all life from existence in what is known as the Blip. This lasted for 5.5 years in the timeline until the Avengers reversed the Blip in the following movie, Avengers Endgame. According to official Marvel canon, the exact time frame of the first snap and the reversal snap was May 31st, 2018 all the way to October 17th, 2023. And now I figured I'd put myself into the shoes of a wrestling fan who was blipped but then returned out of nowhere as the victims of the blip experienced a mere 5-second delay in life when they actually missed 5 years. What I'm also going to do is imagine that all pro wrestlers actually survived the blip and remained active in the 5 years that half of all life was gone. So here are the main things that I would have missed out on in the wrestling world. The era of the Tribal Chief. In May of 2018, Roman Reigns was still being heavily booed by the audience and failed to beat Brock Lesnar twice for the Universal Championship. In the 5 years of the blip, I would have missed out on a lot of things involving Roman. His championship victory over Brock Lesnar at SummerSlam 2018, his battle with leukemia, the final run of the Shield, his god-awful feud with King Corbin, who at the time of the blip still had hair and was the Lone Wolf, and the big heel turn from the big dog to the head of the table, as well as the first 3 years of the epic Universal title reign. At the time of the blip, Roman Reigns was practically at his worst as the big dog, and at the time of the blip's reversal, he has had a gimmick change and the longest championship reign of the last 40 years. The entire existence of All Elite Wrestling. In May of 2018, when the blip took place, there was no such thing as AEW or even a hint of a new wrestling company being on the horizon. As a wrestling fan, the only thing remotely connected was the heavily promoted All In event set to take place that September, but because I vanished, I missed the entire event that changed the game of wrestling. And as a result, I missed out on the creation of AEW by Cody Rhodes, the Young Bucks, Kenny Omega, and the Khan family, which in turn led to a lot of things missed out on, including CM Punk's return and second exile from wrestling. As a result of missing AEW's entire existence, a prominent thing I missed as a victim of the blip was the long-awaited return of CM Punk to pro wrestling. By the time the blip first took place, CM Punk was less than 10 days away from his second UFC fight, which I also figured he'd lose just like the first one. Something else I would have missed out on was his brief WWE return on the Backstage show in 2019. But most notably, as a result of being dusted away, I would have missed the entire AEW run of CM Punk, from his return in August 2021 to his termination in September 2023. The rise of Jon Moxley. At the time of the blip, Dean Ambrose was dealing with a bad injury in WWE and had yet to return. Not only would I miss his final months in WWE, but his entire run as Jon Moxley in AEW, which would include 3 world title reigns, epic match after epic match, and the gimmick where we all question how long it would take before he'd start bleeding in every match he competes in. Sting's return to wrestling. The last we would have seen from Sting was his Hall of Fame induction, in which he officially retired from pro wrestling. As we would miss out on AEW's entire existence, we would also find out that Sting not only debuted with the company, but actually returned to the ring to put on good matches, and that would just lead us to wonder why he didn't get that type of exposure in his short WWE run. MJF's rise to dominance. Knowing absolutely nothing about who Maxwell Jacob Friedman is at the time of the blip, one of the things I would miss out on was the creation of one of wrestling's most despised heels in recent memory, as MJF rose to prominence in AEW and solidified himself as one of wrestling's most important figures. The rise of the American Nightmare, Cody Rhodes. When the blip took place, Cody Rhodes was simply Cody, who was struggling to ensure the All In event would be a success. Not only would I miss All In and the creation of AEW, but Cody's performances in the company followed by his departure and return to WWE in 2022 as the American Nightmare, as well as his main event performances with the likes of Brock Lesnar, Seth Rollins, and Roman Reigns. The Thunderdome era. One of the only fortunate things about being a victim of the blip is that I would miss the entire COVID-19 pandemic, because at the time of the snap, COVID-19 did not even exist yet, nor was hinted at existing. So as a wrestling fan, I would have missed the entire era where WWE performed in their performance center with no fans and then later limited fans, as well as the digital Thunderdome era where all events were performed in front of screens and lasers, which would be a good thing because I'm so used to fans in attendance. Walter/Gunther in WWE. In May 2018, Walter was not even a blip, no pun intended, on WWE's radar, but was already making his mark on the wrestling industry. As a result of being blipped, I would have missed his entire WWE run starting from January 2019, which in turn means I'd be told that he held a championship for over 850 days in NXT UK, followed by breaking the Honky Tonk Man's record as the longest reigning Intercontinental Champion of all time, all while putting on epic match after epic match after epic match. The final years of Bray Wyatt. This is without a doubt the saddest part of being a victim of the blip, missing out on what would be the final years of Bray Wyatt's life as he passed away 2 months before the blip was undone. The last thing a victim of the blip would see of Bray was his tag team championship run with Woken Matt Hardy, who at the time of the blip's reversal is gone from WWE and in AEW for nearly 4 years. This means that I would miss out on the entire Firefly Funhouse era, the arrival of The Fiend, the destructive nature of The Fiend, the eventual release of Bray Wyatt, his impactful return a year later, and his final run before his death, which we would also miss. The wrestlers who died in those 5 years. Imagine living life normally, and then after a short 5-second blackout, you wake back up and realize that several wrestlers have sadly died in the 5 years you don't even remember missing. Here are some of the names of wrestlers who died throughout the entire time frame of the blip. Big Van Vader, Nikolai Volkov, Brian Christopher, Jim the Anvil Neidhart, Mean Gene Okerlund, Pedro Morales, King Kong Bundy, Ashley Massaro, Harley Race, Rocky Johnson, Howard Finkel, Shad Gaspard, Pat Patterson, Brody Lee, Hannah Kimura, Razor Ramon, Antonio Inoki, Jay Briscoe, Superstar Billy Graham, The Iron Sheik, Terry Funk, Bray Wyatt, among others. Ronda Rousey's impactful first run in WWE as well as her second atrocious run. At the time of the blip, the only match we've seen Ronda Rousey compete in was the mixed tag against The Authority at WrestleMania 34, which would mean we'd miss out on her impact within the company, which led to the creation of the all-women's pay-per-view Evolution, as well as the first ever women's main event at WrestleMania 35. She'd return 3 years later in 2022, but the second run would be something we are glad we missed out on because it was not that good whatsoever. Ronda would announce her retirement from combat sports and pro wrestling merely days before the blip was reversed, so we would miss literally everything from her in WWE. The rise of the man. Becky Lynch was hanging out in catering as the Irish Lass Kicker at the time of the blip, so the list is big on what we would have missed out on. Her amazing heel turn at SummerSlam in 2018, her run as the man, her involvement in the first women's main event at WrestleMania, her 1-year-long title reign, her pregnancy absence, her return with more long title reigns, and her many feuds with the likes of Bianca Belair, Trish Stratus, Charlotte Flair, Sasha Banks, and more. Matter of fact, from the perspective of a victim of the blip, we would see that she went from a jobber and catering to the NXT Women's Champion and figured she just got demoted with nothing in between those years. Seth Rollins' many gimmicks. By May of 2018, Seth Rollins was the Intercontinental Champion and continuing his run as the Architect. But not only will we miss his Royal Rumble victory in 2019, along with his Universal title reigns resulting in defeating Brock Lesnar twice, but we'd be wondering what happened to him with his goofy outfits and Joker laughs, not to mention the audience singing his new theme music all the time. Then we'd look up that he became the Monday Night Messiah and later the Visionary, as well as having his ring name literally being changed to Seth freaking Rollins. The impossible return of Edge. This is something that would absolutely shock any wrestling fan if they were a victim of the blip. At the time of being vanished, Edge returning to wrestling from his retirement was still not even a thought on anybody's mind because everyone deemed it impossible. Just imagine waking up from the blip in the present day and seeing that Edge not only returned to wrestling in 2020, but won his second Royal Rumble match, had epic feuds with the likes of Randy Orton, Roman Reigns, AJ Styles, and Seth Rollins, and even jumped over to AEW to reunite with Christian Cage, who we also thought would never wrestle again at the time of the blip. Cowboy Brock Lesnar. If I blipped, came back 5 years later, and was told that Brock Lesnar started a new cowboy gimmick in 2021 away from Paul Heyman, I would think you're crazy due to being so used to Brock being an emotionless monster with his manager for years. Vince McMahon's retirement, return, and sale of WWE. Being a victim of the blip in May 2018, I'd just be thinking to myself that Vince McMahon should step down as head of creative in WWE and give the reins to Triple H, who at the time was dominating in the black and gold era of NXT. Fast forward 5 years later to now, I'd find out that in July 2022, Vince officially retired from his position and full creative control was given to Triple H. However, in January 2023, Vince returned to his role as chairman of the board and then sold the company to Endeavor, who also owns the UFC. I'd have so many questions on my mind and would definitely have a lot of stories to read. The rebranding of NXT. May of 2018 was a time where black and gold NXT was dominating the eyes of the wrestling fan base, with the likes of the Undisputed Era, Johnny Gargano, Tommaso Ciampa, Shayna Baszler, among others at the forefront. And everyone was convinced that it was better wrestling than the main roster, me included. But then you get blipped, wake up 5 years later, and discover that everything about NXT changed drastically, including the leadership. From Triple H in black and gold, to Bruce Pritchard with the NXT 2.0, to Shawn Michaels with the new white and gold era of NXT. We'd also see that NXT went head-to-head with AEW for a couple years and lost in the ratings almost every time. A majority of our favorites are either on the main roster or gone from the company, and were presented with fresh new faces like Carmelo Hayes, Braun Breaker, and others. Main event Jey Uso. As a result of missing out on the entire Bloodline era, we would also miss out on the rise of Jey Uso as his own man, because the Usos had just come off a SmackDown Tag Team title run in May 2018 with no signs of changing who they are. In the years we missed, the Usos had a couple more title reigns, Jimmy got injured, then Jey took charge and challenged Roman Reigns for the Universal title, which began the Bloodline. After a record-breaking tag team title run, Jey eventually became his own man thanks to Sami Zayn, and we'd return from the Blip to find out he's on his own and feuding with his own brothers, Jimmy and Solo Sikoa, who we probably didn't even know existed at the time of the Blip. Dominic Mysterio's debut. By May of 2018, we still had not seen or heard of Rey Mysterio's son Dominic since his brief appearance on SmackDown in 2010, so we would literally miss everything he went through since 2019. The brief feud with Brock Lesnar, his debut at SummerSlam 2020 with Seth Rollins, teaming with his father for a few years, joining up with a new stable called the Judgment Day, and then fighting his own father at WrestleMania 39 before going on to be the most heavily booed heel in pro wrestling today. Jeez, we missed a lot. The existence of the Women's Tag Team Championship and the 24/7 Championship. As both titles debuted in 2019, almost a year after the initial Blip took place, we never would have heard of such belts. We'd miss out on the entire lineage of the 24/7 Championship, which also means we'd miss out on some of R-Truth's best moments in his entire career. Meanwhile, we'd miss out on the Women's Tag Team titles, and those who actually survived the Blip would tell us that we actually missed out on absolutely nothing with those abominations. Actual fun celebrity involvement. We didn't get much celebrity involvement worth remembering when the Blip first took place. But in the 5 years we were gone, we would miss out on actual fun matches involving celebrities with the likes of Pat McAfee, Logan Paul, Bad Bunny, and even Johnny Knoxville's hilarious encounter with Sami Zayn. Perhaps the most embarrassing matches in WWE history. One of the positive results of being a victim of the Blip would be the sparing of having to watch some of the most embarrassing matches in WWE history, including DX versus Brothers of Destruction at Crown Jewel, Goldberg's matches with The Fiend and The Undertaker, and of course the worst Hell in a Cell match of all time in 2019. Being told that a Hell in a Cell match ended in a match stoppage would definitely confuse those who missed the last 5 years. I could go on and on about what else we would have missed out on as a result of the Blip, but this video would end up being way too long. So feel free to post in the comments what else we would have missed from being dust for 5 years. And don't forget to subscribe for more content, click the join button to become a channel member, and give me your input on what other types of content you'd like to see.